You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Harvey Dent's quote in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight not only applies to the protagonists and antagonists of fictional movies, but also has many real world implications, including in the world of economics. Hi, my name is John Bitar. My mentor is Reed, and I'm presenting from McLean, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. My research project aims to look at the impact that the PEG had on the Lebanese economic crisis. So, why did I choose to research this topic? Well, first and foremost, I have a personal connection to this topic, given that my family is from Lebanon and both of my parents immigrated from Lebanon to the United States. And here's a picture of me with my cousin in Lebanon 3 summers ago. Additionally, I'm interested in finance and economics, and I've had an interest since I was about 8 or 9, buying my first stock at 9 years old. And I'm currently an active member in my high school investment club. So I decided to merge those two, my background and my interest in finance, into this research project. I have a lot of family in Lebanon that has been affected by Lebanon's economic downturn, specifically my uncle, who was a loan officer who lost his job as a result of the 2019 economic crisis. The Lebanese financial crisis had many aspects, but I wanted to focus on the PEG due to its broad nature. If you want to think about the Lebanese economic crisis as a domino effect, you could almost think of the PEG as one of the first dominoes to fall. I also wanted to focus on how other nations, including Lebanon, can prevent similar financial crises that were as broad in scope as the Lebanese one. And finally, my research question is, how did the Lebanese dollar peg contribute to the nation's financial collapse, and what can be done to reverse this in the present day? So, a quick overview. Lebanon is a small country in the Middle East on the Mediterranean. It gained independence from France in 1946, so right after World War II. And during that post World War II period, specifically in the 1950s and 60s, Lebanon was very economically successful. So, three specific factors that led to Lebanon's economic success are its banking secrecy. Lebanon passed the banking secrecy law in 1956, and that made it so that foreign countries and companies could not investigate people who placed Lebanese denominated bank accounts, which made it very attractive for foreign investors. Its neoliberal economy, very free market capitalism style, limited government regulation, which led to a boom in business, and tourism due to these two factors, in addition to Lebanon's beautiful landscape. And all these factors led Lebanon to be called the Paris and Switzerland of the Middle East. However, all that came crashing to a halt in 1975 with the Lebanese civil war between Palestinian-backed militias in Lebanon and Christian-backed militias in Lebanon. The civil war lasted for about 15 years and ended in 1990, causing major destruction. Post-war, there was a big financial crisis as well as and the infrastructure was ruined, the government was in crisis, etc. So there needed to be a solution to bring Lebanon back to its feet, so to speak. In 1992, former businessman Rafik Hariri was elected to be Lebanon's prime minister, and he kind of aimed to quell the economic aspect in addition to the government aspect. But I'm going to focus on the economic aspect for this presentation. He aimed to attract foreign investment in part through the neoliberal policies that had made Lebanon so successful immediately after its independence. He did this particularly through real estate ventures, and the best exemplifier of this, or one of the best exemplifiers of this, is his revitalization of downtown Beirut. Additionally, Riyad Salame was his former private banker. He was appointed as the governor of the central bank, and he was hailed as a financial mastermind for his tactics to quell the Lebanese financial instability, which I'll mention later on. The implementation of the PEG. So the PEG, for those who don't know what a PEG is when a country fixes its currency to a stronger foreign currency, and that was the focus of this research paper. In Lebanon's case, they made it so that 1,500 Lebanese pounds would always be worth $1. Fast forward to 2019, there's deep economic unsatisfaction, especially with the government among the Lebanese people for their corruption. And the sort of straw that broke the camel's back was in October when the government proposed a tax on WhatsApp calls. This didn't happen but immediately the damage was done. People went to the streets, they rioted, and people lost faith in government almost overnight because they view this as an infringement on their personal rights, especially after everything that the government had done to ruin their lives. Informal capital controls are implemented, meaning people could no longer withdraw some or even all of their money from their bank accounts. By March 2020, you see inflation on the parallel market, the black market essentially, deviating from the pegged rate of 1,500 pounds to the dollar. In March 2020, Lebanon defaulted on its Eurobond debt. And as you all know, in March 2020, COVID-19 also hit, which hit Lebanon pretty strong. In August 2020, there was the Beirut port explosion, which caused thousands of injuries and hundreds of deaths, adding insult to injury. In February 2023, Lebanon officially devalued itself from the pegged rate, even though this was kind of a symbolic move as the peg rate had been pretty much obsolete for the past 3 years. And in 2024, Riyad Salema was indicted and arrested on charges of fraud. So some of the problems with the peg. Originally, the peg were great. It worked great to stabilize and bring the Lebanese economy back to a baseline. But after 2008, problems began to show up. And one of those problems is that the peg was almost an artificial or inflated value that was unsustainable. It was artificially high, and the value of 1,500 pounds to the dollar wasn't really set in stone. So problems began to show up. Foreign remittances dried up, specifically during the Syrian civil war in 2011, because people were no longer sending money back home due to the unstable situation in the region, leading to the cash reserves evaporating. And one of the requirements for a peg is that you need those foreign cash reserves to maintain and defend the peg to back it up. Additionally, there was inflation for imported goods due to the low cash stockpile, because when you have a low cash stockpile, it's hard to buy foreign currency to buy imports in turn, which led to inflation among those imported goods. And because Lebanon imports so much, those affected all corners of daily life. Add political instability to the mix, outside of even the economic factors, and Lebanon's foreign investment was decreased as a whole. So there are some solutions. So I'm going to go over what the IMF has proposed and what Reed and I have proposed. So the IMF has proposed a 5-pillar solution. It has told Lebanon that they will give them a $3 billion aid package in exchange for them following 5 steps, or 5 pillars, as they like to call it. And this basically boils down to 2 main ideas, you could say. One of them is for Lebanon to improve its dilapidated infrastructure, specifically its electricity grid. And the second is for Lebanon to improve its banking system and implement banking reforms to be more in line with global banking standards, to fight money laundering, terrorism, and also just to bring overall stability to the economy, to give the Lebanese people the stability that they have not had in the past few years. So the proposed solutions that Reed and I have done, the first one is dollarization, which is just replacing the pound altogether and making the Lebanese economy fully dollar-based. The con to this is that, I think in my eyes, the main con is that it would be, first of all, it would be very hard to implement. It would take a lot of time. And second, it would kind of remove a big part of the Lebanese national identity. The second would be a hard peg, or basically the same as a regular peg, but Lebanon would have to have a lot more foreign reserves to back up that peg. The big problem with this is that Lebanon wasn't able to maintain a regular peg, so there's little faith in that they will be able to implement a hard peg. The third is a floating rate, which is what Lebanon has seen now, after they devalued the peg officially in February 2024. So now the Lebanese pound is floating at about 89,000 pounds per dollar, which is pretty stable relatively. The problem with this is its instability. Fourth is debt restructuring, which includes Lebanon restructuring terms of their debts to foreign nations to make them more favorable. This can include lowering the interest rates on them, having the debt be paid out over a larger period of time. And fifth would be bank restructuring, which would involve a major revamp of the Lebanese banking system, which would include possibly Lebanon having more currency in its reserves, to back up its bank accounts, and not just have so for example, in the US, it's about the currency requirement in banks is about 10%. So let's say, for example, hypothetically, what if Lebanon would have been required to have 20% or 30% of those physical reserves to back up their customers' accounts. And this could also, bank restructuring could also include the merging of banks to be stronger so they could merge their reserves together to implement this solution. So Reed and I landed on dollarization and bank restructuring as our two recommendations for the Lebanese government to implement. And we kind of chose these because they're big picture and we believe that they should be implemented in lockstep together. So on one hand, you'd have the bank restructuring, which would lead to people having more trust in the banking system. On the other hand, you'd have dollarization, which would lead to a full dollar-based economy. So you'd have trust on the transactional side where people would have faith in the dollar side and the money side, day-to-day purchases, and on the government side with banking, and that they know that their accounts won't dry up overnight like it did in 2019. And all of our solutions and recommendations point to the road that Lebanon needs permanent fixes, and banded solutions at this point will not work. The World Bank has called this the worst economic crisis since the mid 1800s. And so really a big revamp, a big new proposal, new solutions are needed for the Lebanese economy to get back on its feet. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.